The commonsensical Hazlitt was no more convinced by Berkeley's position in the principles, that all those bodies which compose the mighty frame of the world have not any subsistence without a mind, than he could accept Hume's sceptical hypothesis of a mind shut up in the narrow cell of its individuality. Yet where Kuyp at Dulwich Art Gallery was concerned, he was speculative enough to entertain the idea of Berkeley's theory as a stimulus to the imagination rather than an intellectual truth. Quote, "A fine gallery of pictures is a sort of illustration of Berkeley's theory of matter and spirit. It is like a palace of thought, another universe built of air, of shadows, of colours. Everything seems palpable to feeling as to sight." That's a quotation from Macbeth, with the dagger before him. "Substances turn to shadows by the painter's arch chemical touch. Shadows harden into substances. We discover distance in a glazed surface. A province is contained in a foot of canvas. Look at the kite next door. It is woven of ethereal hues. A soft mist is on it, a veil of subtle air. The tender green of the valleys beyond the gleaming lake, the purple light of the hills, have an effect like the down on an unripe nectarine. You may lay your finger on the canvas, but miles of dewy vapour and sunshine are between you and the object you survey." Unquote. The nectarine analogy is another of those striking figures of speech that Hazlitt employed to enliven description by translating it into some other form. But here it serves an opposite purpose to the analogy between the globe and Wilson's Apollo. That analogy established an illusion of reality. This analogy evokes the reality of an illusion. This is because, following Berkeley and Macbeth's spectral dagger, the evidence of touch is at odds with vision, so that pictorial artifice and spatial distance contradict rather than reinforce each other, creating exactly the kind of equivocal wonderland experienced by the patient who supplied Locke with his answer to Molyneux's question after his successful cataract operation, when he said, I quote, "Pictures would feel like the things they represented, and he was amazed when he found those parts which by their light and shadow appeared now round and uneven, felt only flat like the rest, and asked, which was the line sense, feeling or seeing?" Unquote. By keeping the evidence of the senses apart from each other, Berkeley's theory supplied Hazlitt with a rationale for a world of art as an enchanting deception. The full meaning of the passage is greatly enriched by the introduction of the essay that explains that the collection was specially endowed for the students of Dulwich College. As an apparatus for instilling wonder, the gallery is an exalted supplement to natural learning. Yet it brought this thundering denunciation from Ruskin in 1843. "Now I dare say that the sky of this first-rate Kuyp is very like an unripe nectarine. All that I have to say is that it is exceedingly unlike a sky. There is no such thing as a serene sunset sky with its purple and rose in belts about the sun." The attack centres on the perceived mismatch between Hazlitt's analogy and Kuyp's failure to capture the truth of nature. Yet it is fascinating to discover that in the later elements of drawing, Ruskin concurred entirely with Hazlitt's understanding of Locke's theory of the flat retinal image, but entirely disagreed with how artists should respond to it. The perception of solid form is entirely a matter of experience. We see nothing but flat colours, and it is only by a series of experiments that we find out that a stain of black or grey indicates the dark side of a solid substance. The whole technical power of painting depends on our recovery of what may be called the innocence of the eye. That is to say, of a sort of childish perception of these flat stains of colour merely as such, without consciousness of what they signify, as a blind man would see them if suddenly gifted with sight. Unquote. The artist must free himself from habit by stripping away from retinal images exactly those synesthetic associations that Hazlitt thought essential to instill either an imitative or imaginative conviction in spatial illusions. Ruskin had roundly condemned solidity of projection in painting as evidence of the vilest mechanism to which art can be insulted by giving a name to. He didn't like it. His use of the term retirement of solid surface, by contrast, carefully avoided tactile implications in praising Turner's spatial recession. He convincingly evokes the way in which Turner dismantled the rigid stage scenery that interaction with Wilson's space depended on, in favour of a supersensuous, prehensile grasp of pictorial distance that far surpassed Claude's illusionism, arguing that if ever an edge is expressed in Turner's Mercury and Argus, it is only felt for an instant and then lost again, so that the eye cannot stop at it and prepare for a long jump to another like it, but is guided over it and round it into the hollow beyond, and thus the whole receding mass of ground going back for more than a quarter of a mile is made completely one. To minimise human agency, Ruskin resorted to a Platonic theory of perception to justify Turner's mystical penetration of the flat retina without the aid of touch. Quote, "Sight is an absolutely spiritual phenomenon, accurately and only to be so defined." And yet Ruskin restored synesthesia at the spiritual level when it came to engaging with medieval art and Tintoretto's painting through the faculty of imaginative penetration, that penetrative, possession-taking faculty, a piercing, faultless-like mind's tongue that works and tastes into the very rock heart. So it's synesthesia, but it's super-sensuous synesthesia.
2 minutes, Richard.
What interests me is the remarkable fluctuation in these critics' attributions of spatial plenitude or emptiness as tokens of pictorial success or failure. Hazlitt applauds Poussin's landscape with the blind Orion for throwing us back in wonder and contentment on the first integrity of things, but condemns Turner for creating pleasure only by the excess of power triumphing over the barrenness of the subject. The artist delights to go back to the first chaos of the world. Why should Poussin produce integrity while Turner only manages chaos in their equally totalizing visions of nature? To conclude, how far did Hazlitt's conception of gusto anticipate the project of colonialism by evoking art that can recall time past, transport us to distant places, and join the regions of imagination and new conquest to those of reality? A few quotes. In 1854, the great botanical educator Thomas Huxley conceived of nature as a gallery of paintings with their faces turned to the wall, and claimed that science provided the catalogue that relieves botanical blindness by instructing us which are worth turning round. In 1862, the scientific popularizer James Hinton wrote his essay Seeing with the Eyes Shut to ask what a wonderful world it is when we look at it thus, not according to, but through the senses, tracing in imagination the development of human thought. In 1873, Walter Pater characterised Leonardo's strange veil of sight as an interchange between commercial and psychical distance, because his teacher Verrocchio had taught him how to fill the common ways of life with the reflection of some far-off brightness, and years of patience had refined his hand till his work was now sought after from distant places. The embedding of synesthetic perception in several 19th century discourses, colonial, scientific and commercial, is worth further study as an instrument of global modernity and one modern possibility.